Welcome back to episode number 5 of the K2C podcast, the Kenya to Canada podcast. My name is Ambrose. I'm the host, and today we have none other than, I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Trina. You've probably seen me in a couple of the previous episodes. And I'm currently based in Canada. For those of you who are new, welcome.
So today's episode is going to be, is the 20-hour work week enough in Canada? Every international student, or rather every student, is allowed 20 hours a week. Now, maybe Trina could tell us, because right there I've caught myself speaking on something I'm not very sure about. Is it only international students who are allowed 20 hours, or it's students across the board?
It's just international students. So national students or domestic students can work pretty much as many hours as they would like. But international students are limited to the 20-hour work week.
Okay. And I feel like that's the perfect way to start the podcast, definitely, because I didn't even know that. I thought it was across the board. Now, recently I was posting to, I think it was my Quora or my Reddit. Those are two forum platforms. And I asked that question. I was like, is the 20-hour work week enough for students? And at the time, I didn't know if it was only international students. So the person who responded to my question was like, they created that system so that the student still has time to focus on the reason they went there for school.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, if it's only for international students, why doesn't it apply for natives or people or Canadian students?
Right. I honestly don't know why they chose to apply it to international students, because as an international student, when you're coming, the one thing that is that emphasis is placed on is that your visa is limiting you to only 20 hours a week. Natives, they don't have anything like visa requirements. They don't have anyone monitoring how many hours a week they're working. They can pretty much do what they want. So I'm not really sure why the restriction is specifically placed on international students. I guess that explanation does make sense for you to focus on your studies, because you're investing so much to come across the world for many of us, to come here and pursue further education. But I mean, these people, the Canadians, are also investing as much time. They may not be investing as much resources, but they're investing as much time as well into their academics. So I honestly have no idea. I don't know why they've made that difference or that differentiation, but it's what the Canadian government wants, and it's what works for them, I guess.
Yeah, I guess even when you look at it in terms of resources, time is a resource as well. And I'm guessing they are also, like, their teachers involved. There are all these different aspects to education, where they want to feel like they're giving value, because I guess it's also like the marketing. It's like it's marketed as a place that has this stellar education system. And if people are not really performing academically, then that kind of branding or marketing goes out the window, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like maybe let's now just move on. At least we've talked about, we've shared our thoughts on that aspect, on the 20-hour work week for international students. I would like to know how you set up your work hours when you got that side. A lot of people may not know how the system works. I know you had an interesting work experience, because at a certain point you are working consistently, maybe a few days, then you switched, now you are doing one day. So I would like you to take us through that process, and yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. So there were a lot of things that went into consideration when I was trying to tailor my work hours. The first thing was obviously my school schedule. I had to do it based on the days that I had class, the days that I didn't have class. If I had classes, there were some weeks where I would have classes predominantly in the beginning, like Monday to Wednesday, and then I would have Thursday to Sunday off with no class at all. There were other weeks where my classes were just kind of sprinkled across the week. You'd have 2 hours on Monday, 3 hours on Wednesday, 5 hours of classes on Friday. It was kind of like distributed. So I mainly looked at what my school and class schedule looks like, and then I tailored my week around that. But another thing that went into consideration was I always needed to have, I made it a rule for myself to have at least one full day in the week outside of class to study. So if I have, for example, class on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, either Tuesday or Friday, I would not put that day as available for work. I always left one of those days blank, because all they need is 20 hours. I don't need to give them 70 hours of availability and then, they kind of pick and choose. I wanted something that was like a routine. So I was very strict in terms of the number of hours I'm giving them. I said, Tuesdays, I don't have class, but I want that day to myself. And I took it off for myself. And then on Fridays, for example, I would give them a specific number of hours too. Now, I will say this approach, I did it after I got the job. Because if you go into the job when you're applying for the position and your hours are so rigid, they're probably not going to want to work with you. So when you're going into the job, it's just a tip. Go in with a bit of flexibility, demonstrate a bit of flexibility. That way they'll be more likely to choose you. Then once they choose you, you can kind of assess the workload you're having to do at your job, and then your workload as well. My workload, I needed a full day off in order to be able to catch up with all my work. And the work was, you were standing for 8 hours straight. I didn't want to do that, in the middle of the week on a Tuesday. So I had to tailor my week around that. But even once I did that, I still had restrictions. Like Friday, I would say I'm only available from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm not available from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and I'm not available from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. because one, I wanted the morning hours to study a little bit. And then two, in the evenings, I didn't feel safe where I was living, moving around at such odd hours. Like I was downtown of Ottawa. So there was a lot of craziness that went on past 9 p.m. So I had to do that restriction too. So yeah, there was a lot that went into play when I was choosing my hours. It was class schedule, and then the days that I wanted off for myself in order to study, then the safety that I would feel during those hours if I gave those hours up as me being available.
It sounds well thought out, what you've put out. I like how you prioritized yourself. You had a day for school only. You had a day set aside for yourself where you're like, you know what, I'm not going to be doing any kind of work. And then you kind of sprinkled the hours across the board. Now, what I would be interested in knowing, probably even someone in the audience, were there opportunities to work your 20 hours in one day?
No, no.
Okay.
So there's a law in Canada. Well, at least I know it applies in Ontario. I would imagine it applies across Canada. You can't work, well, with some exceptions, you can't work more than 8 hours, like
In a
an
day.
8 hour. Yeah. So the maximum number, at least for like where I'm working now and where I worked, when I worked at Zara, the maximum number of hours in a day that I could work was 8 hours. I couldn't exceed that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
8 hours max. Then you kind of like distribute. You might find you have to do 8, 8, 4, 8 hours, 8 hours, 4 hours in the days, or just kind of distribute them across the week.
Okay. Is there a minimum number of hours? You've mentioned a maximum.
Um, some places would prefer like minimum 16 hours if they're going to offer you a job, a
Or
part-time job.
this is in general, not just one day.
Or one day, yeah, that's generally in one day. Minimum I'd see people working is like 3 hours.
Hmm.
Yeah. So you can't pop in for an hour and then pop out. Minimum I'd see them giving is 3 hours.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
most people prefer like longer days so that they're not really bringing in many employees in that one day.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks for that. You also mentioned flexibility, right? Being flexible as you go into looking for these job opportunities, not being too rigid. Now, I feel like that was clear, but what I want to know in regard to flexibility is the flexibility of the hours, right? Were they
Mm.
interchangeable? Like as soon as you've got the job, were you able now to tell your employer maybe you need a few changes made or whatever it is? Maybe you could walk us through that if you had an experience like that, or maybe a friend's experience that they shared with you.
Yeah, so you definitely can change your hours in the middle of the, once you've got the job and you started working. Where I was, most places, especially in the retail sector, you'll need to give them like a 2 week notice, because what they do is they release the schedules for every 2 weeks. They release the schedules every 2 weeks in advance. So for example, for this week, the schedule would have been released maybe 2 weeks ago. So they need a bit of time in order to plan and restructure the schedules and the hours that they're giving. There's a bit of flexibility, but most employers, I experienced a little bit of a challenge before I changed my hours, because when I was applying for the job, I said, you know what, listen, this is my availability. And then when I actually started the job and I started school as well, that was not, I was not going to be available all those days in a week and truly give everything I had to the position. So I went and I just told them, listen, schoolwork, this is how it's looking. Work, this is how it's looking. I can't give you these days anymore. I need to change it. Most of the time they won't say no. They'll if it's a reasonable change, they'll agree to it and just restructure the schedule according to that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question I have, and this is not even on script, but I know that 20-hour work week applies when you're in school mostly, right? So
Mhm.
maybe you could tell us what the holiday looks like for you, right? Once you finish school, how are you spending the holiday? Maybe to maximize on your earning potential.
Yeah. So the holiday, you can go crazy. You can work as many hours as you please. Um, the holidays, what I would do is 2 weeks before my holidays begin, I'd obviously give that notice of telling them, listen, my schedule, I'm now available. I'm available pretty much 40 hours a week. Do as you please. Give me as many hours as possible. And then in the holidays, you can work one job, you can work two jobs, get a second job to do just for like a month or two, and then probably drop it after. There's no restrictions on the holidays.
Mm,
As long as you're out of the academic year and or the academic term. So for example, September to December and then January to April, as long as you're out of that period, you can work as many hours as you want.
mm.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Another thing I noticed for myself is you could do two jobs, right? When I was in Kamloops, I ended up doing two jobs. I was working, well, they were mostly the same company because it was a cleaning company that had a parent company, right? So the parent company kind of hired me to work somewhere else as well, right? So I started spending some of my hours working this other side, and then for this other company that's under the parent company, I was working elsewhere. I want to know your experience on this. Is it common in Ottawa, or have you heard about this with some of your friends?
I've definitely heard about it. So you'll find some people will work. I had a friend who worked 10 hours in one job and then 10 hours in another job. That's because they found a job that was able to give them that flexibility of working less than 16 hours. In my case, we couldn't work. If you're giving less than 16 hours, you're pretty much going to be laid off. They don't need you at that point because you're not really giving much to them. So if you're able to find a position that gives you 10 hours, or a decent split, go for it. The more experience you have, I guess, the better. And you don't get into like the routine of one specific job.
Yeah, the jobs I was doing, there was definitely the routine of one specific job. It was all cleaning. It was all like janitorial work. But one, I was working at a supermarket, then the other side, I was cleaning a trucking company. Like they had offices. So I used to go clean that side
Yeah.
for part of my time, spent part of my time at the supermarket.
But the
Now,
setting is different.
sorry?
The setting and the surrounding was different, right?
Yes,
Which
definitely.
I guess is the advantage, because with one job, you're seeing the same faces. every single shift you have.
Fair
Same
point.
faces, same routine. But I think one thing that the people that I spoke to, one thing they appreciated was just the opportunity of getting to work with different people and different personalities and in different settings too. But I get it was definitely routine in terms of like the tasks you're performing. But the difference in the setting made a difference for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense because one of the jobs I was doing it alone, the other one I was working with people. Now
Mm.
I would like us to go into talking about the money. I'm sure someone who's watching this is like, you guys are wasting time. I want to know, this is the most important question I have. How much can I earn? And mostly coming from this side, coming from Kenya, Uganda. I speak of Kenya and Uganda because I'm Ugandan. I'm living in Kenya. So those are the references I have. Um, Working as a student is not really pushed. It's not part of our system, right? So a lot of people, at least I know for myself, let me speak for myself. When I was coming that side, one of the main selling points was that I'm going to be able to work as a student. I'm going to be able to earn some cash. So I'm sure this is an important question for people who are watching. What on average were you earning per month?
Per month in Canadian dollars, like 1,200,
Mm,
give or take, which is about maybe like 100 and I want to say 120,000 Kenyan shillings. Yeah,
approximately, yes.
approximately. Considering the exchange rate, it's about 120,000 Kenyan shillings. But that was after tax deduction.
Mm,
So in reality, without tax, I would be making like maybe 150, 140, 150,000. But
mm.
with tax, it cut it down significantly.
Yeah, before we get into that, because I feel like you've raised an important point that many of us don't think about the taxation side of things, probably
Man.
because, not having worked to the point where we need to pay taxes. Um, what I would like you to let them know is what you were doing. What job was this that was earning you this 1,200 minus tax?
Yeah. I was working as a sales associate in a retail company.
Mm,
So people that you see in clothing stores, at when you go to the cashier to check out a shirt that you've bought at Woolworths, for example, that type of position, that's what I was doing.
okay. Do you remember the kind of taxes you were charged on your salary?
I don't remember the exact, I think it was there was EP, what they stand for, I wish I could tell you. I just know they're flat taxes that
Mm,
you have to pay. I know one is like there's the income tax, which is you're taxed based on, I guess, the progress level of your income. The higher you get, the more tax you experience, the
the
more
bracket.
money, the brackets exactly.
Mm,
Um, so there was the income tax, then I think there was like a health tax. Um, then there was the employer tax, which is I think the EI. When you get your pay stub, they're not breaking it down. They just tell
mm.
you, income, CPP, EI, this and that, GST, everything has been taxed, and then you just get the total.
Do you have some of your older pay stubs, like from when you were in uni?
I think I do. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think I do.
think I think if you could take a photo for us, probably I'll either add it to the edit of the video or I'll post it in the community tab of the channel. So if you're watching this video, if it's not already popped up on the screen, then just go check the community tab. I'll probably do something in Photoshop just to show you some of the taxes. And then I can break it down as well in terms of just finding them out on the internet, just searching them and giving you guys more context to that. Um, what I would like to know now, maybe we can move to how this earning or this monthly salary compared to other jobs that maybe you had seen your friends doing or even that you had done. How did the salary compare?
Yeah, so the salary was more or less the same. It didn't really differ as much, because most student jobs, there's either working in like a restaurant or working in the retail industry, working like maybe some people would work as like bouncers in clubs, outside clubs. So it varied. Bouncers outside clubs definitely made a lot more because your life is you're putting your life on the line pretty much. The
Literally,
people
yeah.
you're encountering are not just regular people who are coming to buy a top and then leave.
Mm.
So yeah, with restaurants and retail, we were more or less on the same level. The income was pretty much the same, unless they're receiving tips. Then it would
Mm.
make a difference. But standard like salary, it was around the same wage range. Yeah, most of the other student jobs, most of them will pay minimum wage. So whatever that minimum wage is, there's not going to be really that much of a difference in the amount that you're earning.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you think tips are a reason enough to choose to do maybe like the waiting job, or those kind of service jobs? I'm thinking mostly restaurants because that's mostly where I see tips. But do you think that's a worthy reason to get into the industry, that particular industry, as an international student working?
Man, it's worth exploring. It's not something I thought of doing, I considered doing, but I guess making a couple $100, maybe a couple, like maybe an extra $50 might help. It might be worth it. But for me, I don't know. I don't understand the tipping culture here. Sometimes you get great tips, sometimes you don't get great tips. Sometimes the tip comes to you and then the person employing you takes a share of that tip. So in actual sense, you're being tipped $5, but the person's taking a share. So you only get $2. In my opinion, that $2 really doesn't make that big of a difference unless it's cumulative, unless you're looking at it and how it accumulates. But yeah, for me, I don't think so.
Mm.
I
You don't
think
think it should be a deciding factor?
I don't think so. I
Mm.
don't think so. Unless like you're really looking for like whatever dollar comes in you're taking, then
Mm.
you might be something worth considering. But I don't understand the tipping culture here. It's sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not so great. So
Mm.
you're really banking on something that you're not too sure about.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you must have some sort of strategy though. If you're going to
Lucky.
be depending on that tip, you better
Yeah.
come with your A girl, you're dressed to impress, you're treating them with crazy customer service, customer experience.
And even
Uh,
if you do that though, they may not
mm,
tip you. It's literally a gamble. You can
yeah,
be on your best behavior, and because someone is just having a bad day or someone is just not feeling generous or the bank account is looking a little bit tight, they're not going to tip you.
yeah. I think it's about, when I think about that strategy, I'm not thinking you're going to get 100 out of 100, right? So
Hmm.
you're looking at, um, okay, how I would think about it. I know here we're veering off a bit, but I think it's an interesting thing to talk about. It's like, maybe I'm working at a restaurant and there are certain faces you see commonly. It would make
Hmm.
sense to treat those people knowing you're building towards something. If you know you have a 2-year program, you're likely going to be here for a year, maybe and a half. It would make sense to treat these people that come in 3 times a week with a certain level of, you handle them with a certain level of care, to the point whereby they notice you. It's kind of, when they see you, they see a friend of sorts. So
Yeah.
when you serve them and the service is on point, it's like it's a gamble, but it could be a gamble that pays off if you just know how to play your cards, and you're not focused on, okay, this is going to bring in this much,
Yeah.
right? Because it's really
That's
dependent on factors that are, out of your control. But I think that's
yeah.
an interesting perspective on it.
Right.
I would like us to get into talking about how others talk about how feasible it is to live off of your earning per month, right? As an international student.
Yeah.
For me, 1,200 sounds like a lot of money, but it would have sounded like that as well long time ago. It's just that right now I have a bit of experience. It is a lot of money, but I do not think it's enough to live off of. What are your
Right.
thoughts on that?
Right. It's definitely a tight budget. 1,200, because you're looking at the housing you're going to live in. You have to cap that at maybe $600 a month, and then your groceries. Groceries are increasing at a very rapid rate. The price of groceries is increasing at a very rapid rate. So you're going to have to look at that as well, factor that in. You're looking at about maybe $300. And then you're left with like a little bit of money just to wiggle around, just to survive basically throughout the month. It's a very tight budget. Very, but if you're someone who lives, if you can live well within your means and you're comfortable there, or you can be just comfortable enough, then it's definitely manageable.
Okay. Say for, okay, it's definitely manageable. It could be a tight squeeze, like you've mentioned. If you were to estimate, from your experience, how much do you think extra, maybe in financial support from whether it's parents, whether it's from maybe people who are rooting for you back home, it could be from maybe someone who's just financing you, maybe it's a scholarship or, any kind of arrangement where you're receiving some form of financial support. And here we're using the $1,200 as the context. That's the premise we're talking in. How much do you think extra you need in order to be a certain level of comfortable as a student in Canada?
Yeah. Assuming that your tuition is fully paid, you're not really having to worry about paying for your tuition. I would say having like at least 1.5, not extra, but 1.5 total as a base. Starting with 1,500, you can live a much more comfortable life.
And this is if your tuition has been taken care of.
If your tuition has been taken care of.
Okay.
Yeah, if your tuition has been taken care of. And it also depends if you're coming in as, let's say, an undergraduate student or a graduate student, because the living circumstances as a graduate student will be probably slightly different from someone who's an undergraduate student. Undergrads don't really mind sharing accommodation with 4 or 5 people. They're pretty open to it. Grad students, let's leave it as 2 people. You're
We're
more
capping it at 2 people.
Yeah, 2, 3 if you're really, really pushing it. So the less people you have in the accommodation, obviously, the more rent you're going to pay. So it will depend on the standard of living that you have for yourself. If you're okay sharing with 5, 6 people, then you'll be fine. You just 1.5 will do just fine. You'll have extra money to go and travel and see Canada a little bit, or do activities within Ottawa, or just not feel like boxed in, Yeah, so an additional 300 minimum would be great.
Okay. I like how you brought up the aspect of living with other people as an undergraduate or as a graduate student. Maybe is it something that you would recommend? And I want this to be based off of I know the person I'm asking, that's why it's funny, because I know you, but our audience really doesn't. So
Right.
from your own opinion, like maybe you could give us both a subjective and an objective perspective, right?
Yeah.
On this living with someone as a student in Canada. What do you
Yeah.
think about it?
As a student, it's reasonable. I'm someone who likes my space. So I don't like having too many people in my space. It gets overwhelming for me. But as a student, you have to also understand that that's kind of what's expected from you. You're not going to be expected to go out and rent a full apartment on your own as a student. But living with maybe two people is really, really good. 5 people, it gets a bit overwhelming. And that's not from me. I haven't lived in Canada with 5 people, but the friends I've had conversations with who have lived in such house settings, it does get a little overwhelming because someone will come and blast loud music at 2 a.m. in the morning when you're trying to sleep, or another person will have arguments with their partner. A third person will be using the bathroom and leaving their hair in the sink in the bathroom drain. There's just too many issues going on. There's too many issues going on, and getting an understanding of 4 other people who are probably from completely different backgrounds and settings and upbringings might be a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky.
Mm.
It's a bit tricky. So I would say not too many people.
Mm.
Not too many
One or
people.
two, one max for you, but
One
two
max.
if you can, if you're more sociable, probably if you don't mind that. Huh?
Exactly. But there's also like setups where you rent, for example, the basement in a family's home. That's also not a
Mm.
bad idea. You have to live by the family's rules to a certain extent, but you kind of have your own space. You have your room, sometimes you have your bathroom, you have like a little bit of your own privacy to work with, and they're not going to really be entering into that. They're also your
Mm.
landlord, so they don't want you to leave. If you're
Mm.
living with students, they couldn't care less if you left or you stayed.
Mm.
You know, it
Yeah.
varies. Yeah.
Yeah. What you're talking about there, for people who don't know, is called homestay, right? So
Exactly.
you go and live with a family, and you have some experience with that, right? After you finished, right after you finished uni. Now, I don't want us to go into that because that's a separate video idea. I think it
Yeah.
would be nice to share your experience. First of all, housing, looking for housing after school, living with a different family, and then finding a house now, and then buying materials for your house, just stocking it while you're at this new job. That's definitely going to be a video coming up soon. So if you're watching this, consider subscribing. We're going to be talking about housing in Ottawa, which will apply hopefully in certain places in Canada. You get a
Yeah.
bit of an idea of what it's like that side, but we're definitely going to cover that. So on a final note, I would like you to share your thoughts on if a student is coming to Canada and they don't really have options. Like for you, you had the option of some backing from family. I myself also had a bit of that, or rather a lot of that, to be honest. But if someone is coming and they do not have that, and they are hoping to survive on this 20-hour salary, do you have tips on how else they can go about kind of stretching this budget or finding more money when in Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are certain positions that you can go into. Not You probably won't be looking at the standard student jobs where a little bit extra money to come in to save for after uni and have like some more money to live life a little bit. I would say you look into more of like care jobs. So I know a lot of people, I know a couple of friends, for example, in Kamloops actually, who are looking at more of like caregiving jobs and support worker jobs, things of that sort. They pay a lot more money than the typical student jobs. So you'd find their pay is, you're looking at about $25 an hour, which is almost like $8 above minimum wage in a lot of provinces here. The type of jobs you'll be looking at would be different. But I will say with those jobs comes extra qualifications. So you have to do a lot more certifications before you get those jobs, because you're looking after you're literally taking care of people and looking after their lives, especially elderly people, for example. There's a lot of like first aid that you need. You need certain personal support worker certificates from Canada. The ones you have from back home probably won't suffice to work here in a personal support worker or a caregiving position. So you're taking that risk. You'd have to do like maybe 3 or 4 certificates, paying out of pocket for them, and then you hope to get such jobs. But those are the jobs I'd say you'd need to be looking at instead of the typical student jobs.
And that's a very interesting perspective. I know about it, but I didn't know that there were these certificates you need to do, these qualifications, and you've mentioned 3 or 4. So how long on average? And you may not know, you may know, you could also just put out a ballpark number. How long on average do courses or these certificates take to acquire? Because I take it if someone is coming that side, maybe they have 1 year, right?
Yeah.
1 year of maybe some funding, they have figured it out, hustled, and found a way to support themselves for 1 year. But from there, they don't know what's up. So Are these things achievable within a year? Or you could also just tell us how long does it take to get the certificates?
They definitely are achievable because the certificates are, you're doing them online. Most of the time, you're doing them online. So you just register, pay a fee. Some certificates you'll find will take you 2-3 days to complete. All you have to do is just sit, give yourself a weekend and sit and do that certificate and you have it done. Others might take like a week. It depends on one, how forthcoming the funds are, because for each certificate you have to pay. So if you're in the position to pay for them within, like, let's say a 2-week period, you can get them done within that period. That would be my assumption. I've seen people get them done within probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They've got all the certificates they need done and then started working. So
Okay.
it's definitely something you can do very quickly and then apply for jobs.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably another question that's coming to mind. I know it's not related to the 20-hour work week. Is just things like scholarships, things like grants. Have you heard of these opportunities being in Canada? Maybe organizations that cater to international students specifically, because that is mostly our audience. I take it people who listen to our podcast.
Yeah, so you will find a couple of scholarships that are specifically geared to people from third world countries. Excuse me. You'll find some scholarships that are directed towards people from third world countries, but you'll also find some that are directed to academic excellence or lack of sufficient funding to pursue further studies in a particular field. So you might find something that's tailored towards people who are looking at human rights, who are focused on studying in human rights. There's a scholarship specific to that. They are very competitive though, especially the ones that are tailored to particular fields. You're competing with international students, but you're also competing with domestic students. So those ones are really, really competitive. It doesn't mean that they're not, you can't get any. I have friends who have got scholarships from the universities as well, and they're doing well. They definitely cuts back a couple $1,000s from your total to pay. And that gives you a bit of wiggle room in terms of your living expenses. So they are there. They're there. You just have to apply to as many as possible and really put yourself out there. Put your best foot forward and then just cross your fingers and pray that something works out.
Okay. As we close this, I would like to know, because you've mentioned all these scholarships,
Yeah.
one of the main issues that students face is where to find these scholarships, because
Yeah.
you hear about them, but it's difficult to know, okay, these institutes are doing this, and, just be in the mix of things. Is there like
Yeah.
a portal you're aware of? Maybe some of your friends have shared with you or something like that, that you feel maybe might be of benefit to our audience?
I don't have any portal because most of the scholarships are kind of scattered. They're honestly scattered across different universities and different organizations. You'll find the University of Ottawa has 2 scholarships specifically for them from one particular organization, but Carleton has one specific scholarship for that university from
Mm.
from the same organization. I would say just going on Google and searching doing a general search. That's how my friends found them. Just go on Google, do a general search, and then just kind of filter through the ones that are specific to universities. If you have a couple of universities in mind, go onto the university website too and search up the scholarship opportunities. If you go to like the tuition or fees section, for most universities, they'll be able to give you a breakdown of possible scholarships that might be available to you, and then you can apply that way.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I think this has been a very insightful episode. Um, there's a lot of data that people who are watching are going to be able to work through. Um, Probably what I can leave the people with is, we are going to be clipping these videos. You'll be able to check some of them out on the channel, but if you want all the videos, make sure to sign up to my emailing list. It's down in the description. Check it out, get on it, and you'll have early access to these videos as we host more guests, as we, clip up these videos. If you don't have time for a full episode, we got you. We shall be able to supply these videos directly to your email address, so you don't have to worry about that. Maybe I want to leave our guest to, leave us with a message. If she has something to tell you guys, she's 2 years in Canada, And yeah, just the floor is yours, Trina. Just give us a closing note.
Yeah, I would say have an open mind when you're coming in, and I'm pretty sure I've said this in some past videos, but have an open mind when you're coming in. Don't be so like fixed on one particular job. Come in and be willing and open to work in different areas, because if you come in when you already have an idea of what you want in terms of the job, you might be a little bit disappointed, especially if you're looking for a particular salary. Don't say no to something that's paying you $16 because you're waiting for something to pay you $25. That $16 is better than zero as you're waiting. So you might as well be earning in that period as you wait for the $25 job. And I say $16 per hour, not per week or whatever. $16 per hour. We're paid
I,
hourly here, so
I think that's a very solid point you've raised. That last point of it's better to earn something while you're waiting for this other opportunity to come. Because a lot of the time I've experienced this with friends and even myself a bit. It's like, okay, with myself, I was pretty proactive. I was just like, let me get this money. I really just wanted to start making money. But I've interacted with a lot of people who are like, no, I'm waiting for this, or I'm trying this out. They're waiting for certain things to fall in place before they start to earn. And usually what I say is that time is never coming back. If you
exactly.
if you take a month without finding a job, those are 80 hours gone. Like you'll never cash out those hours.
That's
So
1,200 gone.
come on. You already know.
Gone.
Just like
It
that. So I
will
come from the
never hit your
mentality
bank
of
account again.
sorry?
I said that one too will never hit your bank account again.
Exactly. So while you wait, don't be afraid to jump into a job, even though you feel it's difficult, maybe something you've never done before. I had never cleaned toilets before in my life. I never cleaned like a supermarket before in my life, but I just jumped into it. I made a couple of relationships, and I learned a lot. It taught me a lot about myself, and it also, gave me just kind of um, validated my ability to deal in a work environment because I had never like worked for someone else or been in a work environment with other people, right?
Yeah.
And this is not like a high level job, so I feel like it's also a different way of dealing with things when you're in that space. So I like the note you've left us with, very powerful. And yeah, I would like us to just close the episode right there.